Hi, welcome. My name is Zach Garrett, and I'm the Education Manager for United World Wrestling, and I'd just like to first welcome everybody to today's webinar. So our topic today is on looking at the sports psychology part, preparing an athlete for competition. And so we have a wonderful guest with us today. With us is Dr. Judy Goss. She is a mental performance consultant who works with the national and Olympic team members in Ontario, including athletes from Skate Canada, Wrestling Canada, Volleyball Canada, Swim Ontario, and Freestyle Ontario. Judy received her PhD in sports psychology from the University of Maryland and is a certified mental performance consultant by the Association of Applied Sports Psychology. Judy has worked with Wrestling Canada over the last 4 years. Her work with athletes and coaches focuses on performance enhancement, performing under pressure, and building resiliency. She takes an educational approach so that the athletes and coaches understand the theoretical concepts as well as developing the skills and strategies to integrate into their daily training and competitive experiences. So Dr. Goss, thanks for joining us and welcome, and look forward to hearing about the topic today.
Thanks a lot, Zach. I'm going to share my screen here, and I'm going to say to everybody, please, any questions, if you want to raise your hand, as we'd say, or, put something in the chat, that's great. I'd rather really address the questions as we kind of go, because we're going to kind of build on a couple of things today. And as I was saying to Zach earlier when we were just chatting, I usually start and kind of move forward, but today I'm starting at the end, as I might say, and we're going to work a little bit backwards. So we're going to start with that kind of pre-competition plan, what the athlete usually does at competition, and then work backwards about identifying what the things that they need to do, skills that they need to build and develop. And then we're going to obviously leave some time for questions, because I'd really like to get your feedback and also find out what you're struggling or working with right now. So one of the things, and I'm sure that most people are aware, that pre-competition plan or routine, whatever you want to call it, is really obviously to prepare the athlete physically, mentally, and emotionally. Okay. And we know from a lot of research that this basically lowers their level of stress, which allows them to pay attention to other things and just really lets their skills and abilities show, as we'd say. Now, since I am focusing really on the coaches, I'd also say for the coaches who are on this webinar that we also encourage coaches to have their own pre-competition plan, because your ability as a coach to manage yourself really is going to impact the athlete as well. So this is one thing at the simplest form that I would kind of start off with any athlete in any sport, is really getting them to kind of give me that little bit of that timeline. And on this timeline, we have, an hour and a half before they're going to compete. And really thinking about what the actions are. What are they going to do? Sometimes they may be just still even arriving at the venue at this time, registering or checking in or whatever they may do, obviously changing. And, the thing is, lots of people can complete this with no problem. But the thing that we're really looking for is obviously all those actions are really trying to get them, as we might say, ready to go, ready to be able to get out there and compete. Nothing too complicated. But what I want you to consider is all the actions that we do are actually creating different feelings or a state that we want to work on. Sometimes I notice that people go through the motions, as we might say, and a lot of the actions are also dictated by, the way the competition is structured, what coaches and other teammates are doing, and it really doesn't create perhaps the best feelings for themselves. So I would say that most people, could easily, like I said, write down the things that they may do. Come in, chat with your friends. I mean, that social aspect of sports really important. We like that piece, seeing people you haven't seen, competitors, doing your stretch, getting that warm up, and all those kinds of things are pretty easy for most athletes to kind of identify. One thing that I'd like people to start to think about are what are those things that we're doing, creating? Are they creating those kind of good feelings, preparing us to be ready to go, as we might say? Sometimes I have an athlete that might identify maybe, after their warm up, they may, go and talk to their parents if it's a lower level competition or whatever. And I say, well, how does talking to your parents make you feel? And they say, well, a little nervous. And then what do? I watch, the match before me. How's that make you feel? Nervous. Then I talk to my coach. How's that make you feel? Nervous. Well, we're obviously doing a few too many things that are making you feel nervous. So let's not watch the match before you. Let's not talk to your parents. Being a little nervous is fine, but we really want to make sure that the things that we're doing are creating that kind of right feeling or state. Okay. And the other thing that I'd say is I always, say, have a little check-in, a check-in with yourself. Check in with your body, check in with your thoughts, check in with your emotions to make sure that things are going along well. We know that it's a natural kind of increase in that level of activation or nervousness as we go along, which is fine. But sometimes as it grows, we really don't notice it until it gets maybe what we might say a little bit too high. So I'd throw those, little check-in points, maybe one, maybe two times, just to kind of make sure that you're where you want to be. Now, the other thing that I encourage people to do, being from the mental performance side, is what are the kind of mental skills that you're going to also use within that pre-competition plan? So for example, this athlete's going to do a little bit of breathing. Maybe that's a little bit to bring their activation level down. As we get closer to the time for them to get on mat, they're going to maybe do a little bit of imagery or visualization that's going to prepare them for the things that they need to do, which is great. We want to make sure that those mental skills are integrated into their pre-competition plan. So the one thing that I have, which is a huge pet peeve, and I'll be completely honest with everybody, is that people say to me, yeah, oh, Judy, I'm going to do a little imagery before I compete. I say, great. How often do you practice that imagery? And they're like, well, not very often. And I'm like, well, why would you use something just for competition? We need these skills to be well learned, well integrated, and we know exactly what they're going to do. This would be something brand new. That's like trying some brand new skill you've never, you maybe only tried once before, just in the competition. We do not recommend that. So that's why I kind of wanted to start with the plan and then backwards into how and why we're integrating these mental skills into the competition. So really getting to identify what that ready state is, like I said, at the bottom of that pre-competition plan is, I tend to call it that kind of ideal performance state. Okay. And that ideal performance state is really just that optimal technical, physiological, psychological state for you to be able to perform at your best. And I really think of it as being made up of physical feelings, thoughts, and emotions. Okay. So one thing that's really important is for the athlete to understand what that kind of ideal state is for themselves. Okay. We are very much creatures of habit, that we will perform well in a certain state. Now, it's not to say that that state's going to be exactly the same every single time, but that's one reason why we use routines. We use that pre-competition plan in a consistent manner so that we do things and we know how we're going to respond and react to it. So one of the questions I would have for you is, how do you help your athletes identify what that ideal state is for them? So I always said, like, I think about it as the physical, the thoughts and emotions all interacting, and it kind of creates that level of activation, or what we often term as arousal. Now, I hope that most people have probably seen this, as we call it, the inverted U, or people often call it the zone of optimal functioning. But the thing that we need to understand is that that level of activation is related to our level of performance. So as we go along that bottom axis and we start at a very low level of activation, so maybe we're a little tired, lethargic, not really into what we're doing, our performance is not going to be that high. But as that activation level or intensity kind of increases, we get to that little bit of that moderate range where we're going to have our best performances. Okay. And I would say that, most people probably train just on the left-hand side of this, just below that little red circle on the left. That's where they probably train, which is great because we're kind of at a good activation level and we're performing well. And then what generally happens is as we go to competition, a little bit more important, everybody's watching, this is what we're training for. It's a natural increase in our activation level. And we get to that kind of high point there where we're having our best performances. But what we do see for some athletes is we see that activation level actually goes a little bit too high, as we might say, and it gets them kind of on that downward slope and the diminishing returns kind of section of that activation level. So one thing we know is that pre-competition routine or plan with those mental skills can help us to manage that activation level and keep us in that kind of moderate range. Okay, so I want to put it up and say that it's not just as simple as that there are obviously differences in terms of the sport that you're in. Obviously, you can see golf, very fine motor control, sport. We need to be a little lower on that activation or that arousal level than a little bit more of a gross motor, or even I would put, this one is a weightlifting, but I put wrestling on the higher end being a combative sport. So there's going to be differences. There's also going to be differences within athletes. Some athletes may need a lower level of activation, while others might need a higher level of activation. But the one thing is that we need them to understand where they are and how they're feeling. So this is one method that I use. I get the athletes, and obviously this is all reflecting back, but really to think of a really good performance that they had. And I put performance because it's not that they won the match. Now, a lot of the times, obviously, when you perform really, really good, you might win the match. But just to think back about 5 minutes before they got on the mat, how were they feeling physically in their body? What kinds of thoughts were going through their head? Were they focused? Were they distracted? Was their mind racing? Were they, thinking of some technical cues that they need to attend to? What were their emotions? Happy, scared, fearful, nervous, worried, doubtful, all those kinds of things. And just to kind of list, I put 3 lines there, just list a couple of adjectives really is what they're going to list down there. And then we want to do the similar thing for a not so hot performance, as we call it, right? And now this is not a performance when they were injured or sick, because obviously we know those factors are going to contribute to that kind of experience. But they were all prepared, ready to go, and things just did not go well, as we might say. So we want to kind of see if there are similarity or differences. And generally over my lifetime and my experience is we do see differences, and we often see significant differences. And we may see it just in one area, we may see it in 2 areas, and we generally see it in all 3 areas. So I think it's valuable for the athletes to get that not so hot and then that good performance and start to understand what those differences are. Because we also spend a lot of time kind of in the middle, in that mediocre spot. So being able to identify where you are and then what you need to do is the goal, right? Is the goal. So let me give you some examples just of what I generally hear for a good performance. It's nothing, surprising. Some people obviously a little bit different than this, but these are generally, the athlete's feeling strong, they're feeling loose, they have energy, they're warmed up. They certainly have a few butterflies when they think of the kind of body or the physical response. Their thoughts are generally focused, on specific things. They're in control of what they're thinking about, generally positive, few negative thoughts certainly mixed in there, but they're feeling, prepared and ready to go. So emotions, obviously a little nervous, but confident, ready to go. They want to be out there. That's another thing that's always important, is a little bit of desire. And then we have a feeling of maybe feeling calm yet aggressive. We can have different kind of emotions happening, or contrasting emotions that you think may not be able to kind of work together, but they do. And being excited and, happier, is always a great state we want to see. And so much, the not so hot performance, it's not surprising either. A little tight or tense, maybe a little overwhelming amount of butterflies, as we might see, feeling a little cold, distracted, a little bit more negative thoughts, and really focused more on the outcome than, as we might say, the process. Not completely in control of what they're thinking of. Their mind might be jumping around a little bit. Obviously nervous, anxious, worried, fearful, not confident, and really don't want to be out there. So nothing really shocking a lot of the time. Sometimes I do get some athletes that those states are very similar, but generally we can find something that's a little bit different. And I will also say here that I would also say, and I notice with a lot of athletes, that the body piece, the physical feelings that they're feeling, believe it or not, is not the most important thing. And it makes sense, okay? Because most wrestlers and most athletes have been able to perform when they've been tired, when they've been a little sore, when they've, had maybe a slight little injury or whatever. They're used to that. When your head's in the game, as we'd say, you can generally overcome that, okay? But certainly all contribute to each other. So really having a good idea of what that kind of ideal state is for them will help you determine what kind of skills we really need to work on. So one thing that's really important, as we know, is to have the self-awareness to kind of know what state we need to be in, okay? So here's a little question for you to ask your athletes is, how does that athlete's practice state and practice or training state differ from what they would feel in a competition state, okay? So really, we'd like those thoughts in training or practice to be very similar to the thoughts that athletes are having in competition. I would ask you, how should they differ? I know they might be slightly more technical, and you might be adding a few more thoughts, obviously, in training, but just the general thought process of, good stance or positioning, being aggressive, being on the offense, all those kinds of things that we practice on a daily basis is really what we want to transfer into the competition. Often what athletes feel is, my activation level at training is just lower than it is at competition. And that's fine. We do need that activation in competition, right? So what can they do to change that level of activation? That's what we really kind of want to be aware of, as we might say. So obviously, we can talk about, a lot of mental skills, but what I'd kind of focus on is what I call the big five. There's certainly other skills, communication and some other skills that are not what I'd call mental skills, but certainly, beneficial. But when I really focus on these things, these can take care of the majority of the things. So I'm sure that most people are familiar with these: goal setting, imagery or visualization, whatever you want to call it's fine with me. That kind of self-talk, the things that you do say to yourself. And we sometimes don't think of that as a skill, but it is very much a skill. Being able to, regulate those emotions that we're having. So that level of activation, being able to calm ourselves as we may need to, or bring it up, and our ability to control what we're paying attention to. If we can master these 5 skills, and I mean, some people don't really think of goal setting as a mental skill. They think of it as, a planning or, maybe a process oriented thing, which is fine, but it really is a skill. So let's go back and think about how we really want to make sure we teach these skills and integrate them. This is really the big stuff that we really need to do. And what I'd focus on as a coach or as I come into working with athletes is really just teaching them the basics of the mental skills, what they are, how to use them, and when to use them. Okay, nothing too difficult right there. The other thing we want to do is we want to monitor that development in the athletes. We can't just say, go and, speak better, speak more positively to yourself and never ask the athlete how it's going or what they're doing, right? We really want to monitor their skill development. They will get better at it if we practice it, okay? We really want to integrate those mental skills into the on-mat training. That's the essential piece, is showing the athletes where they can use it and how they can use it on mat, so that then it naturally transfers to competition, right? We want to monitor their effectiveness. Sometimes, athletes say, well, I'm really good at doing it in this, certain situation, but not over here. So we really want to make sure that they're being effective. And then we can obviously integrate that skill into competition. So it's not too much different than teaching any tactical or technical skill that you would be working on with them on. You wouldn't just teach them that skill one time and then expect them to be able to immediately put it in the competition. We'd go through that, learning process and challenging it with fatigue, challenging it with timing, challenging it with, pressure kind of thing, right? So I thought we'd go back to our pre-competition plan and pick the skill of imagery and just really take that one for a moment and really just start to think about how we would really integrate that into the training plan. So imagery, these are some of the questions that we'd kind of address. What is the purpose of using imagery in the pre-competition plan? Where and how can you integrate it into training? How else can the athlete use it? And how are you going to monitor the effectiveness? So let's take that first question, okay? What's the purpose of using imagery in the pre-competition plan, okay? So for this particular athlete, there's 3 reasons. We want to keep the athlete focused on technical elements. So if they can visualize or use imagery to remember these things, it's going to help them to keep those kind of in the front of their brain, so to speak, right? We also want to use a little imagery, to build that athlete's confidence. So if they can see themselves prior to the competition executing the skills that they need to do, they're going to feel a little bit more confident, manage that activation level a little bit better. And we also want to make sure that this helps the athlete prepare to compete. Something that's really hard, obviously, during COVID is we haven't had those opportunities for competition. So the athlete being able to visualize themselves really, before the match starts, getting up there, starting, shaking hands, just those first, few seconds of the match really helps them be able to deal with that kind of activation level that they're going to experience. So we can see the imagery has a lot of purposes and is really going to be hopefully helpful to the athlete if they're good at executing that skill. So here's the challenge for you guys. Where and how are you going to integrate it into training? Okay, so this is one of the most important thing for coaches to do is, one, really provide the athletes with the opportunity and the time to be able to use their imagery within training. Okay, so let's just think of some technical elements that you might be working on. It doesn't matter what it is, but you giving the athlete time after a demonstration to maybe run a little bit of an image in their head, seeing it again, as we might say. So giving them that time to shut their eyes, see what you were talking about, whether it's something about a leg or an arm or a position, just being able to run that image again in their head, okay? You may talk the athlete through that image of what they're seeing, what they're paying attention to. I know for wrestling, where it's not all just seeing something, it is also feeling it. So sometimes we can just get the athlete and say, you know, what are you feeling? Are you feeling pressure on your shoulder? Are you feeling pressure on your neck? What are you feeling? So bringing all those senses in to the picture as we'd want it. You could ask questions of them when they're running that kind of sensing image to them. And we can also provide video feedback. If we're watching the video, that's a little bit like running an image. Watch the video feedback, run it again in your head so that you have those opportunities to actually practice imagery throughout the training. Okay. Here's a little bit about the confidence piece. Okay. So after successful whatever, whether it's a, you know, a 1 or 2 minute go or just, you know, a certain kind of drill, provide the athlete with some opportunity to kind of run that image again, learn from it, notice the nuances of it, get a little bit more information, remember maybe what they were thinking, feeling, you know, focusing on before that successful. Similar to a mistake. We all make mistakes. You know, someone might miss a cue, as we might say, providing the athlete an opportunity to run that image to see if they can then notice that cue in a different way and pay attention to it. Okay, I see a little, sometimes I can't seem to get the chat to come up. Oops, I'm a little past that. Zach, can you tell me if was there a question or a comment there?
There wasn't yet. I saw a hand raised, and I just asked him to ask the question, and then I could get back with you on it.
Sure. Okay. Watch the videos of successful performances. Again, building confidence, reminding them so that they can create that successful image in their head time and time again. And we also want to help the athlete to problem solve, okay? Imagery is a really good way to think of if, you know, that, you know, whatever move they did on you, what could you do to counter that move a little bit better? What would be more effective potentially? And really using it as a problem solving technique as well, so that then even after a mistake, they can see themselves being successful after that, okay? And for preparation, okay, same kind of thing. How can we integrate it into training and practice? Athlete can imagine their pre-competition routine. So thinking about it even in training, okay, what is it going to be a little bit different? What am I going to do that's exactly the same? Sometimes I know athletes warm up in training very different than what they'd warm up in competition. We're not going to make it exactly the same, but we do kind of want to intermix it and have some, you know, regular competition prep that they do on a, you know, on a daily basis, just so that they're knowing what it's going to feel like, how it's going to help them prepare. Okay. The other thing is athletes can generate the feelings of activation in their imagery. Okay. Sometimes, you know, training, we're a little bit like this. So really thinking about competition and noticing how that activation level comes up, that can be a benefit for training as well. Okay. And allowing those, athlete is allowed to practice parts of preparation within the training. So similar, you know, one of the things that I find is challenging for athletes, and I know coaches like this in whatever sports. Okay, performance on demand. We're going to go and do this right now. That's great. I have no problem with that. But part of the thing about competition is the waiting. Okay, you have to wait. That's the hardest part. They don't just walk around, you know, the wrestling tournament and say, okay, it's your turn and your turn, let's go. Right? It's that waiting. So I like when, you know, coaches say, okay, you're going to go in 5 minutes. Go sit over there and wait for 5 minutes. You're not actually allowed to be on the mats because that's not the way it is in competition. You're kind of waiting in the holding thing, and then you're maybe moving, you know, towards the mat. So wait for 5 minutes, because it's really that waiting time when we start thinking and worrying, and, you know, that activation lever comes up or down. That's the challenging time. So we can really start to develop that kind of skill there. So we also want to monitor the effectiveness and the practice of the imagery. And one of the things that's really important is to understand what we might say are the qualities of good imagery. Okay, so you understanding and being able to ask questions around what the athletes are seeing or feeling or imagining is really beneficial. Okay, so just to kind of go through some of the qualities of good imagery, and I will, we can do a whole session just on this, but we'll keep it a little bit shorter. But, just understanding the different perspectives that imagery can take. We can have an external perspective, which is obviously as a coach, you have an external perspective of the match, seeing the match as if we're watching it on TV, or an internal perspective, which is actually, from the first person seeing it that way. I encourage athletes to use both perspectives. Athletes these days have obviously see themselves on video, Snapchat, Instagram all the time. So they have a really good capacity to imagine the external perspective. But we also want them to use that internal perspective to see what they're going to see, to imagine it as it's actually going to happen. So both perspectives provide good information. You can really see how low your stance is when you're actually from an external perspective more than you can from an internal perspective. Okay. We want to use all the senses. Okay. Building it. And that's one reason why I tend to call it a little bit more imagery than visualization, because when we talk about visualization, we're just really, assuming that we're seeing it. We want to see it. We want to hear it. We want to smell it. I know, not always the best thing. We want to taste it. We want to touch it, which would be me touching, the hardness, or, touching the other person's shoulder or whatever. But we also want to feel it. What is that kinesthetic kind of body awareness? Where is my stance? Knowing how low I am. That's really, really important. So engaging all the senses of the athletes is important. The other thing is to make sure that it is a clear and vivid image. Obviously, this is one thing that takes practice. I sit with athletes and just, imagine your wrestling room. What colors are the wall? What color's the mat? What do you see around you on a daily basis? Building your ability to kind of do that. You can imagine anything. It does not have to be wrestling specific. I get, athletes to imagine their bedroom and just seeing all the detail and the colors and being able to make a picture or an image of that. Okay. So that takes time. I'm sure that if I ask any of their athletes, to shut their eyes and create an image of their coach, they could do that. No problem. But can they really do a really good image of themselves from the side, for example, seeing their body and their stance? The next thing, which obviously is one of the harder things, is really controlling the image. Make the image do what you want the image to do. So if you want to see, successful, single leg or double leg or whatever, you really want to make that image do what you want it to do. This is obviously challenging. And I also try to encourage athletes to continue imagery or a process of imagery, even after they've made a mistake, even if they haven't been able to control the image, because that's what's going to happen. You may not be able to, defend whatever, attack on you. You're going to have to stand up and continue wrestling. You can't, stop and hit the do-over button kind of thing, right? So we'd like to say, and I try to kind of focus on, let's see 80% successful, and then maybe 20%, a problem solving, responding to, some kind of, takedown kind of thing. That's just a rough estimate, but it's okay to see yourself, it not working out. We really have to kind of start to deal with that, because a lot of the times it's our response to that point scored on us that really has an impact on the next thing that we want to do. And we want to be prepared to do that. We want to use correct technique. Sounds obvious, but most people have a little bit of a bad habit, whatever it may be. And we really want to see and use imagery to practice things correctly. Okay. We also want to use, as I'd say, proper timing. There's nothing wrong with at the beginning when you're just learning and preparing or doing, to slow the image down, to be able to see things as they may unfold and what you're trying to do. But eventually we really want to put it to the proper timing, because that's what we're going to experience, right? So, going and imagine yourself for 3 minutes is exactly what we want to do. And I want athletes to be good at knowing how long 3 minutes is, right? In sports like, I don't know, swimming or running or something, when someone's running, doing a specific time, they get very good at knowing how long 2 minutes or 3 minutes is. But really understanding and knowing how long 3 minutes is probably a little bit of a challenge for some wrestlers. Okay. And the other thing we want to do is we want to really, as we'd say, incorporate thoughts and images, or thoughts and emotions, into the images that we're creating. Okay. So if you're going to be focused on a particular cue, if you're going to be saying certain things to yourself at that particular time, if you're going to be feeling that nervousness, we want you to feel it in the imagery. Okay. And that's a really important thing. So the other thing I want to throw in there about imagery is that we don't have to always use it related to our sport. Okay. Athletes say, sometimes I really need to calm myself down. And the thing that I caution them at is that sometimes we have an athlete seeing themselves being successful and, perhaps winning a match in wrestling, that may actually excite them. It may get them excited, whereas we really want to calm them down. So we have to be a little bit cautious in knowing that some athletes may imagine themselves being successful. It may be, okay, I can do this. It might calm them down, but other people, it might actually get them more excited. So when we really want to use imagery as a calming tool, let's imagine something calming. Okay. Imagine yourself, lying on a nice warm beach. I'm up in Canada. It's pretty cold outside. Nice warm beach, some sand, something that actually calms me down. Just, being at home in my own wrestling, room where I feel very at home, very safe, very secure, kind of calms me down. So we really want to be specific and, use the images that are going to be beneficial to us. And, another example, I think that we do a lot of the technical, tactical, and, on mat images. We also need to do the things around, as I said, seeing yourself in the, in the venue before, warming up as you transition, to the, the holding pen or whatever, and then you move to your mat. That kind of stuff is important to imagine too, because that's where we get a lot of nervous energy and thoughts coming in that we may want to be able to control a little bit. So let's see what my next slide is. Okay. So one thing that I think is always really important, and I put it out there for the coaches, is that practice planning. How much time as a coach do you invest in the planning and the preparation, whether it be writing the workouts, developing the drills, planning for the physiological and the psychological loading that you're going to give athletes, integrating those mental skills into the practice. Okay. What are the cognitive demands? Okay. I work with some coaches and I'm like, I'll see them. And this is a practice plan that one of my basketball coaches has, and he every single day has, a plan written out like that. He has it written out and he saves them. He has the practice plans from the last 14 years. Every single day, he writes it out, keeps that piece of paper. So he can always refer back. He always knows what he's doing. He always knows the loading and that kind of stuff. Certainly, I know coaches, we have that little mental, plan in our head, and we adapt based on what the athletes are saying or doing or giving us, which is fine too. However, we really need to pay attention to how we integrate those mental skills into it, where we give the athletes the time and opportunity to build those skills, and then also how we're going to work those skills as we build forward. So let's see. So I guess that's coming to the end of the slides there. And I'd like to be able to leave it open. I mean, I did not go into all the mental skills because that's just a lot of information. I thought that, as I said, I'd start with the pre-competition plan, taking that one skill and then working it a little bit backwards. I'd put it out to you guys. Do you have questions about imagery in general, or then any of the other skills that you'd like to use to prepare your athletes? You can unmute yourself, ask the question. You can type it in the question box.
Dr. Ross, I have a quick question,
Yeah.
just to get started. Why those of you that have, if you have questions, please write them in the question and answer set in on the Zoom here, and then I'll get those questions answered for you as they come up. But a question that I have is, you know, a lot of times there's more challenges in that pre-competition. There's a lot more restrictions. There's more things that athletes have to do. You know, what are some strategies that you have used for those athletes and how to handle adversity when their normal warm-up and their normal pre-competition plan gets altered at that last minute?
Yeah, well, and I know, listen, with COVID, you know, the huge challenge that everybody, you know, and we have athletes, you know, that have been training for 20 years, their pre-competition plan is going to have to change. Okay. And that's one reason why I really want to start with that piece, because with COVID restrictions, with you know, things that are going to be happening or not happening, you're going to be able to do, you're not going to be able to do. We all need to really address this kind of you know, plan. And I'll give an easy example. Even when there wasn't COVID and we had you know, a normal plan, which we had great control over, one thing that I'd always do is, you know, if the athlete was going to take an hour to warm up, I'd say, let's work on a half an hour plan. We can get warmed up and ready to go within a half an hour. And one day something's going to go wrong, and you know, you're going to have a flat tire, something's going to happen, and you're going to need to shorten that plan. So we want to build a plan that you are confident with, that you can get ready to go in a half an hour as opposed to an hour. Similarly, we also want to work on those 2-hour plans when things get delayed and we can actually, you know, start as we want to. But really, one of the most important things that we want to do is we want to build the athlete's capacity to be adaptable, okay? To be aware of what they need to do. And I think that's probably one of the most important. I know I was with, you know, one of the strength and conditioning people, and they said, oh, you know, I've given this athlete some, you know, activation that they need to go, and it's supposed to take them 20 minutes. They're taking 25 minutes. So I went to the athletes. I'm like, what's going on? They're like, well, you know, my shoulder was a little stiffer than it normally is, so I took a little more time loosening it up. I'm like, that's great. That's self-awareness, knowing that you need to change your plan to impact what's going on right now. So when it comes to that little bit of that adversity, you know, we want the athletes to know that they can adapt and they can deal with it. And that's giving them, you know, some opportunities to be challenged in training, to try different things. When you're preparing them for competition that might happen, we just need to build their ability to know that they are able to adapt. So, so you want me to go through some of these questions here?
Absolutely. If you have them up, I won't ask them for you.
I have them up. So if a coach notices an athlete's getting too nervous, what's the best way to approach the athlete? Okay. Well, a couple of things. One, have a conversation obviously after with the athlete after the competition, you know, to build their self-awareness. Did you notice you were getting nervous? How did you, you know, how did you notice it? What were you experiencing? When did it get too much? Okay. What would you like me to do when that happens? How can we build in? So a lot of that questioning really needs to occur afterwards. And if you do notice this, what can you do at that point? Well, usually bringing the athlete in and sitting them down, you know, taking some deep breaths works with it. One, you know, great cue that I often see with athletes, and you may see it with your athletes, if you notice them yawning before they, you know, compete. Yes, they may be a little tired, but yawning generally signals the fact that I've changed my breathing. Breathing should be deep down in your belly. And when I get nervous, I take short, deep breaths up here in my chest. And your body's, sympathetic nervous system is going to kick in and make you do things that you don't even know you're doing. What is a yawn? A big deep breath. Okay. So any of those kinds of things, we want to work that skill of deep breathing because we breathe all day long and we're not calm, right? So working that skill of deep breathing to be able to calm themselves. Sometimes just talking to them, reminding them of those basic cues, reminding them to recite to you what they're going to do, what that game plan is, that you have confidence in them to be able to, execute. Things like that. I hope that kind of gives you some. Okay, we got another. If a coach is unsure if an athlete is ready mentally to compete, how best to approach the athlete with minimal intrusion? Well, and I'd say these are conversations that need to happen before, right? And I think that's the thing is, before I go to a competition with an athlete, I for sure am saying, what do you want me to do? What, do you want me to come and speak to you before? Are you just going to come to me if you're feeling? If I notice this, can I come and bring it up to you? A lot of the times we just need to have those kind of, as we'd say, a little bit of the side conversation. So remind me and, tell me what's the key focuses for you right now. Okay, great. Because we don't want to go too much to feelings because we know the athletes are probably going to feel uncomfortable and that's okay. It's okay to feel uncomfortable. It's okay to feel nervous. So we don't want to get too caught up in how they're feeling. It's really probably a little bit more about what they're focused on or what they're thinking. So to ask the odd question about, how's, the one thing you've got the greatest, double leg attack I've seen, we've worked on it so much, are you going to use that? Just getting them to maybe think a little bit more of those process pieces will help them focus in on what they need. Okay, so a coach needs to have a different approach and preparation for each individual athlete. Then each athlete take those skills and work on them on his own. I would probably say the majority of athletes probably need, and that's why I really just listed 5 big skills. They probably need, 2 or 3 of those 5 skills. So most of the athletes will benefit from all of the mental skills. So what is probably most important to each athlete? Yes, it's going to make a little bit of a difference. Some athletes will really, it's just paying attention to the right things, and other athletes, it is just calming them down. Okay, so we can use a variety of different skills and strategies, but each athlete, we really want them to take ownership of those skills and work on those skills. I wouldn't say on their own, but just on a regular basis. That's probably the most important thing. So if I have an athlete that I know needs to work on their, being able to calm themselves down, I check in with them. How's that going? Are you working on it? Where did you work on it today? Where can you work on it today in training? I'm going to give you this opportunity at the end of practice to maybe do it. So we probably need to be, and I know it's challenging for coaches, but there are very few athletes that can't use some of these mental skills. So you can really kind of use a little bit of a consistent approach. I always want to be honest. Always want to be honest with themselves and try to compete to be proud of how they compete. Is that good? For sure. I think, getting back to competing after COVID, I really have focused on the athletes to really focus on just doing the things that they need to do. Like, let's not get caught up in the win because everybody's kind of at a different stage of training and where they're at. So let's just start to build the skills about competing well for myself. And as we get in better shape and technically and tactically and physiologically, the wins will come. But let's think about the things that I need to do consistently and build on. And that means competing well for me. And I think that's one thing that's sometimes a little bit hard. Stance, for example. If I keep my stance throughout the whole 6 minutes, that's a real plus. So I think that's good, identifying those. I'm in transition from an athlete to a coach. I had an experience um, before a match, and I had to carry my emotion and my coach's emotion. How can I avoid doing this with my athletes? Yes. So, you know what? It was that very first or second slide that I put up there. When we talk about a pre-competition plan, and I put myself as a coach because sometimes I go to the competition, I have to watch what I say and do and things that I react to, kind of thing. You guys need a competition plan too, so that you prepare yourself to perform as well. Okay. Yes, we do need to monitor ourselves, monitor our emotion. And, I'll give you one of the things that, is probably the most prevalent thing that I see with some coaches is the tendency to overcoach when you get to competition. You remind the athlete of, 82 different things to do. Really, let's just stick with the things that we've been working on, stick with the basic, ABCs of it, and, go out there and have fun. So we do really need to monitor ourselves. And one time we were doing some testing with some athletes, and we put a heart rate monitor on the athletes. Of course, that's not an unusual thing, but we put a heart rate on the coach. And I was really, really shocked to see how calm the coach looked. But his heart rate was really high, obviously, when the athlete was competing and whatnot. So it's something that, you as a coach have to work on managing yourself as well. And if you were an athlete, you're probably used to managing your own emotions too. Okay. I have this athlete who usually performs well in training, but when it comes to competition, they panic. How do I get them ready? This is probably, the most predominant, question that I kind of see is that, if on that inverted U, they perform well in training, they're right where they kind of need to be, as we'd say, but then when they get to competition, that activation level just rises too much. So one, we have to build awareness in that athlete for them to kind of identify. You have to build skills and strategies to help that athlete from not panicking. What are they going to do? And the thing we have to recognize is that the two things that raise the activation level of most people, okay? And there really are two things, that's about it, that make us kind of nervous. One is the perceived importance of the event. So the more important I think this match event is, the more my activation level is going to go. So we want to obviously have a good, realistic level of importance of what the competition is. I always say to the athletes, doesn't matter if it's a small inter-club kind of thing or if it's national championships, still an opportunity for you to go out there and compete. And that comes from the coaches and the parents of how much importance you place on things, okay? Sometimes we do, oh, this is a really important competition. You got to make it through. This means you're qualified for whatever. And we need to watch that. No, it's a competition. We approach all competition in a prepared manner. We, manage ourselves. We go out there and obviously try to perform our best. So I would provide that athlete with some opportunities to have some lower level competitions where they have probably a little bit less importance that they placed on that, so that we can slowly build it up and provide them with opportunities to be successful as that kind of importance kind of increases, because I know certain things are important. The other thing that really makes us, raises that activation or arousal level is the uncertainty of the outcome. The more uncertain the outcome is, the more our activation level goes up. So this is kind of one of those inverted U too. If I'm ranked number 25 and I'm going to wrestle against number 1, the outcome is not uncertain. Number 1, more than likely going to beat number 25, okay? But that's where we see some young ones, some athletes that are ranked 25th, go out there and do pretty well because they're not as nervous. They're kind of right in that moderate level, and they're right where they're going to get the best performances out of themselves, okay? Where it's a little bit more uncertain is where number 8 is wrestling number 10, or, you know, the ranking is a little bit closer because it is uncertain, you know, and anybody could win at that. And when there is uncertainty of what's going to happen, it's going to increase my activation level. So we need to create some uncertainty in what that athlete needs to do to be successful. So really identifying those things that they can do. You know, you're really good at hand fighting. Hand fighting is going to be really important in this. So let's execute our hand fighting well. We really need to be aggressive. You are always on the offense. Let's make sure we're on the offense at this time. So those little key factors of creating some certainty for that athlete about what they need to do, hopefully will help them from, as we might say, panicking a little bit. Okay. Coaches can work on external cues or internal cues before the competition. So do you mean imagery or external cues in terms of words? I need a little bit more from that. Oh, internal, external cues before a competition. So what do you mean? Just either focusing on that one? Generally what we say, as we get to be more proficient at skills, is we want to focus on external things. Oftentimes when we get too internal about my elbow and my arm and all this kind of internal body things, we take away our body's ability just to kind of do what it's been taught. If we focus a little bit more external on, you know, what's happening out here or where the pressure's being, you know, exerted or what I'm looking for, it allows the athlete to execute it that way instead of, as we might think, overthinking what's going on in my body. Does that answer your question there? I hope. So yes, focus on the external cues before that. Those were some good questions. Any other questions or thoughts?
All right, I don't see any other questions. A few thank yous in there. So, and certainly I would like to thank you, Dr. Goss, for joining us today. It was outstanding. I know I took down a few pages of notes as you were presenting. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be here today and help us, you know, work through this process. I know for myself, this is something that we probably as coaches don't spend as much time as we should on. It's often mostly technical. So
that's not unusual, but I know that you know, I always say to the athletes and the coaches, if we just spend, you know, 5 or 10 minutes working those mental skills a day, we're going to make some progress. And during COVID, there's lots of opportunity for that when we're not on the mat as much. And then hopefully as we get back on the mat, those things can transfer quite easily. So thanks a lot, Zach. I really enjoyed it and enjoyed the questions.
Awesome, thank you. And for everybody that's on here, we will be taking the we have a recording of this webinar and we'll be posting it on the United World Wrestling website. So if you want to go back and reference it again, if there's something that you heard but you didn't get down and you want to watch it again, we should have that up in a little over a week. So again, thanks everybody for attending, and thank you, Dr. Goss, for being here. We appreciate it, and hopefully look forward to having you on the webinar in the future.
Okay, you take care.
All right, thanks. Thank you.